Hi, I'm Mike Reynolds, a senior reporter covering the media industry with S&P Global Market Intelligence's Tech, Media, and Telecom News Team. Welcome to Media Talk, a podcast hosted by S&P Global, wherein the news and research staff explore issues in the ever-evolving media landscape. Today, I'm joined by S&P Global Market Intelligence Kagan research analyst Peter Leitzinger, who specializes in the broadcast industry with expertise in TV and radio and political advertising, among other things. How are we doing today, Peter?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Stefan Modric, my colleague on TMT News Team who covers tech policy, is also in the Media Talk virtual house. He's fresh off a stint at a little event held in Chicago last week, the Democratic National Convention. How you doing, Stefan?
Hey, from Chicago. How's it going, Mike?
All right. Peter and I spoke about the political ad landscape back in March, a couple of days after Super Tuesday. A lot has changed since then. Vice President Kamala Harris has succeeded Joe Biden as the Democratic candidate for president. We're going to talk about the race for POTUS, as well as update some of the key battles for control of the House and Senate chambers. As mentioned, DNC concluded in Chicago last week. It followed the Republican National Convention, which was in Milwaukee in July. Your thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, the convention's ended, and I thought both sides are gearing up for a really close presidential race. And as always, their goal is to draw eyes to the television to deliver campaign messages. I thought it was unique to see a candidate change later in the political process, but overall, the polls remain close, and I think it will be interesting to watch. I think the conventions are really a way to drive fundraising and rally the parties together. So you typically see a big wave of fundraising coming in for each party after these events. And for the Democrats, given the change in candidate, I think the fundraising is going to be a key aspect. So we'll see how that plans out.
Stefan, as mentioned, you were in Chicago at the DNC. A couple takeaways from your end?
Yeah, Mike, there was definitely pretty palpable enthusiasm, both at the United Center, which is where all the primetime television events were held, as well as at the convention center where the delegates met during the day. And we'll get to this in a bit, but definitely a pretty large presence, both digitally and physically, in terms of ads, both on platforms like YouTube and social media platforms, and then also physically around the city. I definitely saw a lot of billboards, both for the Harris-Walz campaign and the Illinois Democratic Party had a pretty big presence, and they made it felt for sure.
I got you. Any sense for spending behind Trump and the Republicans now that Harris is at the top of the Democratic ticket? In New York, I've seen a bit from Trump campaign, anti-Democrat ads, a lot more from Harris, especially during the Olympics, but I think that was a significant national schedule. Peter, what are you seeing in California where you live? Are you seeing ads from either candidate or their supporters?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that those highly rated sporting events, you're going to see political ads. Campaigns usually focus in on those high profile events to reach voters. The more eyes, the more ad value for the campaign. On the presidential campaign spending, the Harris campaign recently announced $170 million ad spend on TV, starting in early August, going through Election Day. That doesn't include what the Biden campaign has already spent ads on, which she will inherit. And on the Republican side, so far, the Trump campaign has been outspent by both the Biden campaign and the Harris campaign. However, the spending has been made up by Republican PAC spending. So the spending from outside groups that have taken up some of those functions that traditionally would have fallen on the Trump campaign. One pro-Trump PAC, America PAC, spent $20 million on canvassing since June, according to the FEC. And another Make America Great Again, Inc., which is spending $100 million in advertising going through Labor Day. So two slightly different approaches, but the only difference is where the money is coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense. Stefan, you mentioned you saw plenty of activity on the ad front in Chicago during your stay. What about your new home in D.C. when you've been back there this summer? What have you seen?
Definitely, I think more of the same. There's a pretty robust digital presence on behalf of both of those campaigns, whether that be through the bots that are sending out voter registration reminders or YouTube ads. I think that there's a pretty diverse range of ways that these campaigns are trying to reach voters ahead of this election cycle.
Yeah, Peter, you touched on the fundraising aspect. My email is getting bombarded by the Trump camp. And every time I go to YouTube, Harris-Walz, either together or individually, are asking me to contribute to their campaign. There's been some reports, Peter, that the Harris campaign may be looking to allocate more to digital than most candidates have historically done. Any sense for that, or is that still in this fundraising game at this juncture?
Yeah, fundraising is going to be huge right now. And I did see that the Harris campaign was looking to allocate more to digital. I think that anytime there's a late shift in a candidate running for president like this, late in the political process, digital is going to be a strong way to get that message out there quickly. And it's very efficient to bring in more fundraising. The Biden campaign targeted TV early on, and I still believe TV will, in the end, be the largest share of total political ad dollars. The Harris campaign did say that they are going to spend more than twice the amount that the Biden campaign spent in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. And then they came out and said also that they were going to spend more than 4 times the amount in Georgia and 6 times the amount that they spent in Nevada, with local TV being the beneficiary there.
I got you. So you got the traditional broadcast station ads, which, as you just mentioned, they are the largest player, have been in the political realm for all these years. But connected TV, Peter, is a bigger player this year. I mean, it fills in some of the gaps and the declining linear landscape, and also some good targeting capabilities.
Yeah, it's definitely got its benefits, and connected TV is growing more popular than ever as cord cutting continues to increase. Advertisers are allocating more to the digital video budgets than in the past. So we're seeing more political ad dollars going that direction. The reach of broadcast, I think, is still very strong. And up and down the ballot, the lion's share of ad dollars still goes to traditional TV. So it's certainly one of those areas that candidates can't ignore. And we're seeing more dollars going to digital, but also the overall pie is growing to accommodate CTV.
When we spoke back in March, Peter, I think Kagan was looking at maybe some $4 billion for the stations. That would have represented a 13% gain over the 2022 midterm cycle. Have you guys updated, or are you saying more dollars going to be in the mix now?
We haven't updated our outlook since the news of the Democratic change in Canada. However, we are seeing a huge uptick in fundraising based on that change. And so we're expecting an all-out ad blitz from now until Election Day. So we review our initial projection of nearly $4 billion for local TV, which you said is an increase of about 13%. And we may revise that slightly higher based on the new circumstances. One thing to note is that at the beginning of the year, we saw significantly lower political ad revenue than the 2022 non-presidential election. For many of the top broadcast TV groups, their first half of 2024 political was down 17% from 2022. And that was due to the lack of presidential primaries early in the year. But that said, I still think the second half fundraising will lead to one of the largest surges of political that we've seen in recent history.
Stefan, given your time in Chicago and back home in DC, I know you said there's ads everywhere. If you had to say, what are you seeing more of? Are you seeing more digital? Is it more local TV? Any sense you can give us from your perspective?
Yeah, like the cord cutting millennial that I am, I don't have the best sense of what's going on in the traditional linear broadcast space. However, I can tell you that definitely in bars and in restaurants, at sporting events, what have you, and anywhere that you can potentially see some of these broadcast ads, you're seeing that definitely a spike in political ads. And then, of course, as I alluded to before, some of these more emergent, non-traditional social media platforms that are out there that, for example, on X, formerly known as Twitter, there's definitely a big spike in political advertising, and then seeing that even on Instagram or TikTok as well.
Yeah, I guess no matter where you're looking, you have seen, and you're only going to see a lot more until we get to November 5th. So everybody brace yourself. Peter, you mentioned a few swing states, the Harris campaign going to up the ante considerably. And I think you mentioned Georgia and Nevada. Overall, are we still looking at the election coming down to 7 key toss-up states: Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Pennsylvania's in that group?
Yeah, Pennsylvania is part of that. That is a state largely seen as one Trump needs to win to regain the presidency. But I think he named them all. New Hampshire was thought to be one early in the year, but now that is looked to be firmly Democrat leaning.
Okay. Again, in terms of we're here with on the Senate side, has there been big spending in those states as well? Are you projecting some really big outlays in the key senatorial battles as well.
Yeah, the fight for the Senate is playing out almost entirely in democratically held seats this year as they try to defend the 51 to 49 seat majority. West Virginia, the retirement of Democrat Senator Joe Manchin could become a flip seat there. And if Trump wins the White House, one seat is all the GOP really needs to flip the chamber. I've seen outside spending and PAC spending there increase since May. It was considered a toss-up election until Manchin announced his exit, so it's being heavily targeted. For Democrats to hold that state, the party would most likely need all their incumbents to win. So that would mean candidates would need to prevail in open seats in Arizona, Michigan, and Maryland. So for those Senate seats there, they're expected to be a dogfight and see heavy spending on Senate campaigns there. Outside of those, in Montana, Senator John Tester is a Democrat looking for his fourth term. And he's up against Republican Tim Sheehy, a former Navy SEAL and businessman who's self-funding his campaign. And that race is expected to be close and draw a lot of campaign ads. In Ohio, Sherrod Brown is defending his Democratic seat in the traditionally Republican state, and he's running against Bernie Moreno, which has been one of the most contested races that we've seen. Brown has booked $43 million in ads since April. Moreno just announced a $25 million ad buy there, and I expect that to come down to the wire. Since the primary there, Republican PACs have booked about $136 million in ads in that state. And then Arizona, the retirement of Senator Kristen Sinema has made the race with Ruben Gallego and Carrie Lake a super competitive one. They agreed to do a debate in October 9th. And so I expect a huge amount of political ads on both sides there. The Senate race is one of the most closely watched races in the country, and Republicans are hoping to flip that seat to regain control of the Senate there.
So it sounds like in all those areas, the airwaves are going to be stocked with ads. How about in the House? Democrats upping the ante as they try to flip that chamber back into their hands.
Yeah, there's definitely a few regions that we're seeing a lot of political ad dollars. Democrats need to flip 4 different states to take back control of the House, making them very competitive. In Maine, the 2nd congressional district, where Republicans have been trying to unseat the 3-term Democratic incumbent Jared Golden. Republican Austin Thoreau is a state lawmaker, former NASCAR driver, and he's looking to unseat Golden there. And nearly 16 million in political ads have been reserved for that district, which Trump won twice. And then you look at Pennsylvania's 8th district, the race there between Matt Cartwright and Rob Breshenin. And it's been reported that Democratic groups plan to spend about 13 million on ads, and Republicans plan to spend 10 million in that district. And then in California, the 13th congressional district in the Central Valley, it's expected to be a very tight race between John Duarte and Adam Gray. That's a rematch from 2 years ago. Democratic groups are planning to spend 7.6 million on ad buys there. Republicans have reserved 6 million. I expect that race to ramp up significantly. And then in your neck of the woods, Mike, the New York 4th congressional district in Long Island, where Democrats have the opportunity to recapture the congressional seat there with Republican Representative Anthony De Esposito going up against challenger Laura G.N. Democrats aligned groups have reserved nearly 7 million in ads there, and Republicans have reserved about 4 million. So those are just a few that come to mind. And there are some others in Arizona and Washington, D.C. that will also be competitive.
Got a busy scorecard, Peter. Getting to the end here, given, as you mentioned, tossing all these $1 million figures out, on their second quarter earnings calls, Sinclair, EW Scripps, and Fox all projected toward record political ad revenue this time around. Nexstar executives are also very bullish, given its station base, plus News Nation, and some political fare migrating to the CW, as well as the Hill website. As you look at the station groups, Peter, who's in best position to capitalize on what sounds like it's going to be a very robust political season from here until November 5?
Yeah, I think Nexstar Broadcast Group and Gray Television are likely the best positioned, with 28 and 23 full power TV stations located in what we classify as swing states. Out of the 7 most competitive presidential swing states, Gray stations cover Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and they have a very strong presence in 3 of the 4 remaining states, North Carolina, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So we anticipate they will see strong political ad revenue. And Nexstar has stations in a majority of the competitive markets because of their huge portfolio. In the 2022 midterm election, Nexstar produced and distributed 50 political debates in states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Texas. They have News Nation for their national coverage, which also benefits from political. And I don't want to forget EW Scripps and Sinclair Broadcast Group. They're also well positioned in swing states, and they do many of those same tactics that bring in political ad revenue.
A lot of dollars, a lot of places to go, a lot of close races, or so it would seem. Can you just give us a sense, Peter, again, in terms of historically, what percentage of political ad dollars are spent from Labor Day through Election Day?
Yeah, typically we see almost half of all political ad dollars spent on TV coming in during the months of September through November. And that's largely due to the higher premium ad spots, a lot of local debates, overall political climate being at the forefront in the news and social media. So we have a Trump-Harris debate scheduled for September 10th, and I expect both of the candidates to really lay out their different approaches, with political ads being a huge driver of the message going into that debate. And just comes down to crunch time as voters make their decisions before going to the ballots. I expect that to be an even more important part of this year with the pivot to the Harris-Walz campaign.
Stefan, you were in the United Center that night when Harris delivered her speech. Any quick takeaways from what you heard from her, or the response in the crowd must have been overwhelming?
Yeah, it was definitely a very enthusiastic response. The fire marshal actually was turning away people with credentials because they had maxed out the capacity there. And it was packed to the rafters, and she definitely seemed to have capitalized on that moment. And I know the campaign released their fundraising numbers, that $540 million, and I believe it was $82 million that they had raised just from the week of the convention. Yeah, so definitely, I think it was a big boost for them, and we'll see how it plays out in November.
All right, guys, that concludes this episode of Media Talk. I just want to thank Peter for spending a lot of time sharing his thoughts on the election and political ad spending. And also want to know, Peter, if we can put you back to work again one more time with a bit of a spending outlook as we get into late October.
It's going to be huge. I know that. All that money is going to be spent before Election Day, so we'll see how it turns out.
All right. I also wanted to express my gratitude to Stefan for giving us a sense of what it's like to be on the ground at the DNC last week, and all of the ads he's been watching back in Chicago and his home in the nation's capital. Thank you, Stefan.
Thanks, Mike. Enjoyed it.
All right. I also want to thank all of you for listening. This is Mike Reynolds. We'll catch up on the next edition of Media Talk when Kagan Analyst and I scout out the 24-25 NFL season on September 5th. Thanks, everybody.